Good day, and thank you very much for tuning in to this new episode of a Microdose Diet. So my guest today is Joe Moore. Joe is the co-founder and CEO at Psychedelics Today, which is a leading organization in psychedelic education, media, and advocacy. He is also a board member of the Psychedelic Medicine Coalition. So you're getting someone who's really, really savvy, but it's going to try to make it accessible for everyone. So you should all get a lot from that conversation. So my name is Peggy van de Plassche. I am a former banker and venture capitalist. And I now speak and write about the benefits of alternative medicines, such as microdosing psilocybin for professional and personal growth. So you can follow my work on Substack, LinkedIn, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere on earth. So Joe, thank you so much for being here today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's fabulous. So let's get started right away. So you're the co-founder of Psychedelics Today. Tell us more about, the mission, the business model, why you started the organization.
Ooh, it's big. We really want to change the world in a really big way and improve drug policy globally and unlock the human potential. Like obviously, a lot of us see how the Earth could be,
Yes.
and it's going to take substantial mind shift to get to the place where it's the planet we're really hope to see and are proud of. So it's kind of revolutionary, my approach, but it's also I have to be a bit practical too. So it might be a couple hundred years to get to where I want to be, but doesn't mean we can't try.
You
right?
need to start somewhere, and it's interesting you say that, because every time I speak about psychedelics, whether with people who are well aware or not, I always go in the same direction you are going, which is imagine what it could be and what it could do if we were all even slightly more aware. So if we really look at psychedelics today, can you tell us more about the organization? What is the day-to-day? What is the business model?
So the day-to-day, we're doing about 2 podcasts a day. We have since the beginning of pandemic. We were just doing one for a while and said, let's double down and help everybody through this. And it was helpful for us too. And then years and years ago, so we started 7 years ago with no real intent of having a business. And we started selling classes because we were like, okay, can we make this, self-sustaining? So we're not looking for cash. We're just like, how do we not have to pay the bill to do this? And, we designed courses for college students because we wanted college students to have an easier time. A lot of kids experiment in college, but there's no real mentorship or training available. So we started doing that, and that was really successful. And then doctors and therapists started showing up in our classes.
Yeah.
And while that was amazing, we're saying, like, this isn't really for you. So we had to build a program for them, and now we've got a continuing ed approved program there. Yeah, and then we years later, we weren't really satisfied with what we saw in the psychedelic education space at the top tiers of offerings. So we said, let's make what we think is the most amazing thing possible, and we launched this Vital program. I think last April, not 23, but 22 April, had about 130 students, and that's a 12-month training program that we think matches and rivals CIIS, MAPS, et cetera, Naropa. So we're really proud of it.
Yeah. And, that's what's interesting, because, and we all have different opinions. I'm not a big fan of psychedelic assisted therapy, just because I think it's not accessible for most people. I think it's very expensive. I also think that you should not give your power away to other people, and that you should be self-sustaining. So that's my philosophy. So I really like the fact that you're offering these courses where people can take the power in their own hands and make the right choice and the right decision. So what have you seen in terms of feedback from people who followed these courses? I'm sure you must hear a lot of people who've seen tremendous changes, positive changes in their lives.
Yeah. One of the biggest wins people walk away with from our Navigating Psychedelics or Vital programs is community. They're just blown away with the depth of connection they have with people after being with them for, so the Navigating Psychedelics program is 47 hours roughly.
Okay.
And so they have, a lot of opportunity to communicate with each other and, study on their own, and they build a lot of connection. And imagine what that looks like extended over a year, and then with retreat offerings. And it's
Amazing.
yeah. So one student came out saying, this course was just an extraordinarily psychedelic experience for them, because they started to see all the connections from all the different sides and the history and nature, all these different communities coming together. And they just loved it. And then they, said it was effectively like a liberal arts degree on psychedelics.
Yeah. Uh, what's very interesting is that psychedelics is actually very little studied. So when you look at medical or scientific professionals, which by default, my mother was asking me, but what you're doing, is it supervised by doctors? And I was telling her, the same doctors who make a medical mistake and almost killed you a few years ago? No, it's not. And it's very funny, this default idea that I'm going to go for someone who's an expert, even if it's not even in their curriculum. So what's your thoughts about this whole medical scientific, I would say, footprint, and the fact that they should be the ones owning the space?
That was a really charitable term, footprint. I like it. So no, like there, years and years ago, most people in Western countries could buy effectively whatever they wanted, and culture seemed to operate just fine. For instance, like even ibogaine was available in France for a long time before it became really popular here. Heroin, cocaine, etc. People did fine. I don't really believe that we need physicians to be the ones to issue us drugs. I really am working towards a more, hopefully, free place where we can explore ourselves and have the right to explore ourselves. Because if we don't own our bodies and what we can put in our bodies, what do we own?
Exactly.
And not much is the answer. And and the drug war, obviously founded on racist premises. It was never really about protecting people. It was about imprisoning people, extending a war on people. So and folks can read the history. It's pretty out there. If you read 2 books on the history of the drug war, you'll nail it. But really, I think doctors should be here. I don't think doctors should have the sole voice in this space. I want to, continually work to empower humans, as opposed to the medical establishment. The medical establishment is really out of control, at least in the United States. And, the AMA and American Psychiatric Association are really against this push towards decriminalization and access, because it's a really powerful, in their mind, psychiatric drug. Not exactly true. If we medicalize who we are, if I am entirely a medicalized entity instead of a human, then sure, perhaps that's true. But I think I'm a little bit more than
just that. Well, when you're a hammer, you only see nails, and that's always the challenge. And that's also what we've seen during COVID, where you can look at it saying it's on purpose, that if you are in the medical space, you want things to be highly medical because it's your own interest. I also think that for some people, it's not that calculated, and they went in that direction because they truly believe that everything should be medicated. So you have a big conflict of interest here, unfortunately, whether you're talking about big pharma, medical, all of that. And that's the big challenge I see in psychedelics. So what type of advocacy are you doing with Psychedelics Today in order to make sure? I know you're doing all the courses, which is giving more power in people's hands. Are you doing other type of advocacy to make sure the decriminalization, legalization is supported, so people like me can do what they want with their own body?
So, we talk about this ad nauseum on the podcast, and we write about it somewhat regularly on the blog. And those are probably our 2 most impactful spaces. And then as our company, and then I do support the Psychedelic Medicine Coalition as a board member, and we are working to get science funding from the US federal government for psychedelic research, which hasn't really happened in a meaningful way yet. There has been some federal funding of research, but not much. And one of the lines that's most meaningful to me that I've come up with is like, more people now than ever in the history of the planet are using psychedelics, and now it's like a public health issue and imperative for them to be doing research, and they've really not accelerated and kept up at all with the people, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, and that's very funny because I was in finance for a very long time, and you could always see, regulations trying to catch up, which obviously leave a lot of bad actors, play in this gray and white space. What's interesting with what you're saying, it's also this idea that in the US, there is a lot of polarization, but it seems to me that around psychedelics, both sides of the aisles have been able to work together. So that's very interesting as also a reconciliation process kind of for the country and the political spectrum.
I think the science is becoming very clear that it's an economic necessity at the very least that this be implemented as medicine to the United States. And, once we understand, maybe the people will be better off if they can find other routes of access that don't cost so much. I think psychedelic therapy is amazing, but I agree with you that there's a lot of problems around access that are going to come up with the pricing and whatnot. And I hope we can pull it off. I really do. I think we will. It's going to require a lot of creative thinking, a lot of reconciliation and peacemaking. And it's probably not going to look how any of us want it to in the medical context.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting as well with, the US, Canada, Europe in some degrees is that you see such a widespread of legislation where obviously in the Netherlands, that has been something that has been a non-event for the last, 20 years, 30 years. I don't even know for how long. And we're starting to have a conversation only now. Even within your country, you have places like Denver or, Oregon, that are way ahead of places even like New York. And it's very interesting because I think being a public health issue, this is a federal problem. That is nothing to do with which city you're on or which states you're on, and to some degree to which country you're on. Like it's very interesting. A body is a body. So in New York, it's more dangerous than in Denver. Doesn't make sense.
To defend the United States briefly, because I don't do it often, the country was designed to move slow and not, in a lot of ways, not keep up. So like all of our frustration is kind of like, a lot of our frustration is kind of by design in that aspect. And it's frustrating because we see developments that could be implemented immediately. Right.
So what do you mean by design? I'm sure we're going a bit further in history, but you open up a box, I cannot not go there,
Like the judicial, like the three branches of government here, like all of that is, a three-part process that's like convoluted and like can get shot down at any phase as you're moving stuff through. It can get challenged later. Like there's and it's like a representative democracy, right? So it's not
direct.
It's not direct democracy in the way that like a lot of us think might be good. So yeah, like as a result, things like institutions move really slow. Like institutions have inertia. Like,
yes.
Like the DEA has a lot of inertia. The United Nations has a lot of inertia. And when there's a lot of people, like it's hard to move that ship, turn it around, steer it,
It's interesting you mentioned the DEA because similarly to the medical establishment, if you are a hammer or if you have a hammer, you only see nails. And if you're in the DEA, you might not have an interest in creating less work for yourself, but also you might believe that it is bad and it is big evil, because otherwise you might not be at the DEA yourself. So do you see a lot of pushback from this type of group, for the DEA, for example?
I think they're confused about what to do more so
Okay.
than anything. So when some of the decriminalization bills went through, or almost went through, there was a big bust of a really small mushroom grower in Denver. And they had
Oh,
multiple DEA agents bust this young guy for
oh,
barely growing any mushrooms. And
oh,
and then there was a few other cases like this too, right before decriminalization gets implemented. For instance, another person had members from 5 or 6 agencies raid his house because he ordered San Pedro cactus, which is perfectly legal in the United States, but there was a mistake. Customs thought it was peyote. And as a
ah.
result, he got arrested for a number of days, was incarcerated for a few days, and his 90-year-old mother and his 9-year-old daughter got exposed to
Ah.
militarized police violence in his
Mm.
home. And it's like, this is an extension of the DEA's war on drugs. And that said, there are people that care inside the DEA. They want
Mhm.
reform.
Yeah,
I don't know how, I don't know the proportion.
yeah,
I've never actually shook a DEA agent's hands to the
yeah.
best of my knowledge. So I am curious about their position, and like, how are you all trying to differentiate drugs? If not, like, my position is that the DEA needs to be dismantled. Like,
Mhm.
enforcement should go to the US Marshals, and all the drug safety should go to the FDA. There's no real reason for this weird militarized
Yeah.
force that's just,
Well, and
harming
that's
folks.
we're gonna go in a second to a question I have for you
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the disruption that we're gonna see in humanity and the approach to healing and wellness, and that's the connection I'm making with what you're saying with the DEA and what we were seeing with the medical establishment. Everything, or at least my perception, and in many countries, France is extremely backward, if I can say, in that context, but it's more about legalization, criminalization than prevention and promotion. So agency like the DEA, even the medical establishment, it's about illness, it's about problems. It's never about growth and getting better, promotion, prevention. So what you're saying make me think about how you believe psychedelics might change the way humanity approach healing and wellness.
So I think there's a few things. Like, we have to challenge this idea of mental health as
Mm-hmm.
as an actual thing. Like, mental health is an okay concept and abstraction. It's helpful a little bit to communicate what you mean, but there's huge limitations there. So health
Mm-hmm.
being like, I've got a lesion or infection, and therefore I can't think about, I can't remember flavors or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So like, that could be the idea of like, oh, there's something actually wrong with my brain, and therefore I get these results. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a really famous book written by this psychiatrist who was part of the group that wrote the DSM-5, kind of
Yeah.
psychiatric Bible, and he really exposes a lot of stuff in there. And he's uncomfortable with this idea of we're medicalizing normal conditions. So I think what's going to happen, and what needs to happen, is the psychiatry and the mental health professions generally should really do some deep diving philosophically to understand what they're talking about, and understand perhaps better ways of treating patients.
Yeah.
There's a lot of improvement in psychiatry.
Yeah.
Like, I'm very pro psychiatry. A lot of people are like, no, like, psychiatrists need to go. But I'm like, no, I think they can be very helpful. They've spent more time with more, dysregulated folks than you ever
Mm-hmm.
will. And they've got some really interesting insights. And not only that, they can prescribe. So I think, we're gonna have to really radically reorganize medicine, and I think that's going to come as a result of our findings from psychedelics once it hits the clinic, because we're
Yeah.
actually going to see like the cure word happening for a lot of people. And
Exactly.
we're expecting 2/3 of people in a lot of these protocols getting cured,
Yeah.
as opposed to like, are your symptoms a little bit less
Managing
bad?
symptoms, exactly, which is what
Yeah.
we've done. And I understand, like, it's big business. Do I want to cure you, or do I want to manage your symptoms for the next 30 years? I mean, if I'm being very rational and cynical.
Yeah.
You know, I have no interest as a doctor, as a pharma exec, to want you to be cured with a low-cost solution on top of it. Because let's be honest, a lot of these solutions are not expensive.
So we are going to see a lot of big pharma pushback, a lot of big pharma acquisitions of small cap biotech companies that are really got some amazing stuff coming. So what I hope is that those solutions aren't buried. Like, you know how like GM and others buried the electric car ages ago.
Exactly.
Let's just hope that doesn't happen again. And what I think is a good hedge is there's so many drugs for so many conditions. There's no real way they can do it. And we can always grow mushrooms at home for
exactly. You can
$50.
kind of do it yourself. But I can see nonetheless, unfortunately, if I look at, I have a lot of people who are asking me questions who are actually, you know, the age of my parents, like 70s, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s, which I think is adorable, lovely, wonderful, you know, at that age to be looking at, you know, improving yourself, bettering yourself and feeling better. I don't think these people will be comfortable, unfortunately, you know, growing their own mushrooms or buying online. And this is more the population I'm concerned about, the population who is so brainwashed with following the rules. And I think I'm Gen X. I have a lot of Gen X who think the same way. Well,
we can do this through normalization, right? And Gen X too, you're right. It's funny. But like through normalizing this, through more conversation, celebrities coming out, athletes coming out, etc. Hopefully politicians like Hunter Biden is a quite established psychonaut and I can't say healed person. So like once we get these stories out more and more, I think we can work to help that population more. I agree with you that they are going to get really taken advantage of, but it's, you know, how do we stack rank our issues? Like what are the most important issues? And I think this is something more people need to really consider. Like,
I agree.
You know, that issue is pretty big. How do we balance that in our minds when we're thinking about climate change, animals going extinct, et cetera, right? And so I'm not going to give anybody an answer, but I hope people struggle with that a little bit before.
Well, but at the same time, the way I look at it is it's a bit, you know, if you have more awareness, which thank God you can get with psychedelics, that would make people probably a bit more willing to be keen on supporting, you know, what you mentioned, climate change. So anyway, that's the way I look at it as well, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's good stuff.
One last question for you. So where do you see the psychedelic industry going with all the changes that we've seen happening lately?
I think it's gonna people want to make this comparison to cannabis. It's gonna be like cannabis meets biotech. It's gonna be two-pronged approach. Like it's a two-pronged approach. And I think there's gonna be a lot of grassroots underground stuff that's gonna keep coming. The R&D and the development and the IP you could develop in the underground is really interesting to me. And then have some sort of like pipeline to a small cap pharma that could then maybe get acquired later. There's some interesting stuff there. I think there's going to be an increase in retreats. More states are going to go legal, like Colorado and Oregon. I think future states will hopefully have better regulation than Colorado and Oregon, though Colorado's regulations are pretty great relative to Oregon. And I think we're going to see the feds like substantially start funding this stuff in the next couple of years. I see no way around it. There's so much support, bipartisan support. Yeah, new drugs are going to be coming all the time with AI and other tools and 3D printing of molecules. Like chemistry has never been cheaper to do. So I think we're going to see lots of new molecules, hopefully mostly safe. Yeah, that's a good purview.
These are already pretty exciting and pretty widespread predictions. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for taking the time. It was really lovely to get your perspective and, you know, going in so many direction in just 30 minutes. That's quite unbelievable. So thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you, Peggy. You have a great rest of your day.
My pleasure. You too.